Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Beatrice Schulter. I'm the director of the Swiss Network for Education and Development called RECI. And I'm very happy to welcome you to this very first OROS. So what is an OROS? It sounds a little bit enigmatic and it's a little bit of a funny name, we think. We are going to get used to this because today is only the first one and we are hoping to have many more. OROS means online or ongoing RECI Open Space. And it is a space, an online space that we are offering this year 4 times, maybe more, we'll see as the demand is. It is a space for members of the Swiss Network for Education in International Development to propose their topics, to call other members to discuss a problem that they are having in a project, maybe on the ground, to brainstorm for new projects, etc. It's really an open space for our members to invite other people, other members, but also on public, to talk about certain issues that they would like to share or discuss. This first one is a public event, and it's really the member who is proposing the topic who can decide how they want to use this space. Do they want to invite, make it open for anyone to join, or is it more something internal in the network? So I'm really happy to present Rolf Gollob. He is the co-founder of the Department for International Projects in Education at the Zürich University of Teacher Education. And this department of the Zürich University is a member of RECI, and that is how we are collaborating together in this event today. In his function at the university, as well as in his work with and for the Council of Europe, Rolf focuses on issues of democratic citizenship and human rights. He is the national representative of Switzerland to the Council of Europe on these issues, and he has been an expert for the Council of Europe for 25 years. In this capacity, Rolf has himself been deeply implied and participated in the development of the reference framework of competences for a democratic culture, which he's going to present to us today. So it is a real privilege and a pleasure to have Rolf here to present this very interesting and practical framework to us and to help us make the first steps to putting it into practice. Rolf, I've already presented you, but I want to say something more about you before giving giving over to you. So this OROS, this first online event, is actually a result of a discussion that Rolf launched at our thematic day last year. It was also an online event, and Rolf presented this framework in a very short time, and many of us here thought that was really, really intriguing and really interesting to have this presented by someone who participated in developing the tool himself. And I'm looking forward to learning more now from you, Rolf. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. Hello to everybody. I see some really familiar faces from different parts of the world. Hello, Marin, and others, Corina. Thank you for giving me the floor. We heard in the introduction that it's about sharing ideas, about sharing experience. And please excuse me that this time maybe it's a little bit of presenting. So it's has some ex cathedra elements because it's about getting to know the background and maybe also a little bit more of the content of this so-called reference framework for the culture of democratic competences of the Council of Europe. To do so, I would like to share my screen now with you. You will have the same slide certainly, but I would like to go in the tempo where I talk through it. So please just allow me to do this as an old-fashioned teacher, I guess. This is when we go to the table of content once more, I will first give a little bit of the history of the background, why this had to be developed, this framework in the Council of Europe. And this has to do a lot with the, let's say, the development in the world of the last years. And then we will have this group activity where you will go in your own experience of democracy experience. And then I will present the tool by itself, also the way it has been set up, is built up. And then we try in the fifth part to combine your experience with the competencies that are presented in the framework. And then, as Beatrice said, we will look ahead. Democracy and the Council of Europe. When we look at what was happening in the last years all over the world, all the challenges and the developments, like, you know, those topics, I will just mention them here, and it's all absolutely obvious and well known to all of us. But our work that we do all over the world is really connected with these elements, and it's sometimes good to go back to the happenings, to the reasons. So elements like these ethnic conflicts and nationalism, global threats, insecurities. We just had another one that hit us a year ago. Development of new information communication technologies, which are the solution here because of pandemic. Now we can meet of this, but at the same time, many teachers or parents are afraid of maybe also the outcomes of those technologies. Then certainly we all know the environmental problems that occur in these last situations, the population movements that occur all over the world due to many reasons and affect many countries and the people very much so. Then new forms of collective identities that have developed in the last years. And due to this, for instance, when we see at the bigger identities that fell apart, new type of national identities that occur. Let's look at Western Balkans, but also at other regions in the world. Then at the same time, we need autonomy. We look for autonomy and we look for equality, but at the same time, we want to belong to places and situations. At the same time, weakening of social cohesion. When we look in Switzerland, for instance, social cohesion also in families weakened because women started to have a more strong identity, and then the family identity became a new one. And some say this is a negative movement. Others say it was time that this was happened. So all of these elements, they form our situation and they form the world we live in. And they were part of the discussions that took place also in the framework of the Council of Europe. Certainly mistrust of traditional political institutions, and certain forms of governance and political leaders. So discussions we have that form also a democratic citizenship. For some, it is a danger. For others, it is a hope. Then certainly we see it right now, this interdependence and this interconnectedness we have in the world. Some young people know more about other young people in other countries far away through the technology, but not about their neighbors at home. A possibility we see happening very intensively. Another thing that happened that really influenced the world was 1998, as we all know, this moment, and this had a huge impact for the discussion in the Council of Europe. Before 1989, it was so interesting, this cold curtain situation. Democrats could say democracy is just not what the others are. And the others could say ours is just the identity of what we are is not what the others are on both sides of the curtain. So we didn't really have to identify ourselves. What are the core elements of the systematic, of the political, of the cultural approaches in the two big systems? But after 1989 and the following years, all of a sudden, a new discussion arose because democracy for the most countries was the proposed solution. So what is really a democracy? what are the core elements? What are the core, maybe also values of a democracy? What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? We see it right now in countries that developed democracy in the last 10, 15, 20 years. They also are faced with the reality that this is not just a system that solves all the problems. It has a lot of difficulties, and we just saw it again on January 6th in Washington, D.C. Can democracy be learned? Or is it something that just is given to you by birth? Or is it just normal that you know how to deal with it? And then in all those transition situations we are all over the world, what does this mean now for a system like a democracy? So in the Council of Europe, all of a sudden, there were many new countries part of the Council of Europe that were before in a different political situation, in a different system. And the discussion inside the Council of Europe, in all the different, in the assembly certainly, but also in many subgroups, all of a sudden was just about the core question: what do we understand by democracy? And is there a unique element to democracy? Or can democracy be discussed? Or is it just a development that has taken place in one place and it is like a colonialism for the others? And then there was an interesting discussion arising in the 90s. What's the difference between an old and a new democracy? For instance, in PISA studies also about the knowledge, it was interesting that knowledge about democracy, the conscious knowledge, was in new democracies very often higher than in the so-called old democracies. And it seemed like our kids in Switzerland, they don't know anything about democracy. How stupid can this be? We don't even teach democratic citizenship or political education in our schools. Is it not necessary? Or why don't we do it? Or is the knowledge about democracy the same as living in democracy? So the Council of Europe was really in an interesting situation all of a sudden, where it had to be discussed. And these are the three pillars, you see it right there, of the Council of Europe: democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. And in this discussion, it was so interesting to see, yes, democracy can really be somehow developed in different ways if it's built on the fundament of the basics of human rights. Because like human rights is not discussable, even though some people discuss it, if it's really a worldwide approach or it's not. Do we really say people have the right to have a voice, to have a name, to have a say or not? But then actually this question that democracy and human rights are closely linked with each other, and then interesting discussion that took place: rule of law. Democracy is not without rules, but the rules are always redeveloped together. So the developments in the Council of Europe, just as a background information for what we hear afterwards, in the year 2000, the ministers of education and sometimes also of internal affairs agreed in the Council of Europe that education for democratic citizenship shall become a priority in all education policies in Europe. It has been a decision. Then, has it taken place? I'm not really that sure. In 2005, we had an action year for all the countries of the Council of Europe, which were already going into the situation that we are in now. I'm seeing Beatrice, you're looking already a little in my view because running out of time, but I will just finalize this first part. Living and learning democracy.
We're good in time. Sorry.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. To see the difference, a core element of difference when it comes to democracy. Yes, it's good to know things about democracy. But the question, what is the difference between my daily approach, living democracy and learning? For schools, this was an immense step and an immense discussion that has taken place, and we will certainly focus on this later on. Then in 2013, an initiative by Andorra was developed to say, okay, we need something else now, because it seems almost all of the countries have the constitution. They have a democratic constitution, but what is the quality of this democracy? So we need to have a possibility to have a closer look at the real content, what is inside, and not just do we have the laws, but what is happening in this daily situation. So what really was taken in account was this difference between democracy as a structure, let's put it this way, for instance, with the division of power and all these elements. But then the core question that arose in this situation, what is the culture of democracy? What is, how can we measure somehow, or can we have a look at this question of what is inside the box? It is so fantastic when you take a, I don't know, a jar of jelly or whatever, and it says jelly on top, and then you open it and it's beans, because it was, there was a wrong paper taken on and glued on it. And sometimes it's the same with systems. It says, it's a democracy, but then let's open the box and let's see inside what is really the daily approach. So what I would like to send you to in discussion groups now is with the following 3 questions. What do you expect from a democracy, living in a democracy? What do you expect from maybe the system around you? What do you expect from your country? But then, quoting President Kennedy, I also would certainly ask the other question: what can democracy expect from me? What is my quality I bring into this system? And the third question, bridging into the life, personal and professional life, how do you experience the presence of democracy and of democratic atmosphere in your personal and in your professional life? So what the name they found at the end, the Reference Framework of Competences for a Democratic Culture, RFCDC. It's like, it's not a good name because nobody can really mention it. I think the end of it is very important. The competences for democratic culture. I would have even liked to call it the quality of democracy as a short element, but my voice was not loud enough. So, they took the longer one, but maybe it's the good one. I just want to say, and this is what I would like to introduce to you now, is that this is not just developed on top of one desk. It's the end of a long, intense discussion. And it's also not the final answer, but it's a very good possibility now to come up with the discussion and with the sharing of experience. So what they have developed is a set of 20 competences developed in 4 different groups, and then 135 plus some 400 descriptors. I will tell you what this is later on. First, they looked at 4 fields in which the competences take place. What are the values of democracy? What is somehow, let's say, the backbone of it? Then what are the attitudes? How are the values visible at this possibility? But then what do I need to be able to do? What are the skills to be somehow democratic or to live in a democratic society? And then also a core element, what are elements of knowledge? What do I need to know? Or what is a critical understanding of my approach? So what they developed is the so-called competence butterfly. Where do you see this now? And you might have seen this already, but this will probably in the coming years appear quite a lot in all the member countries of the Council of Europe, in many different approaches, publications, and so on. So whenever you see this butterfly, you will say, I know it. I would like to have a short look at those 4 butterfly wings. when you count the elements inside, these are the 20 competencies. So values has 3, attitudes has 6, and so on. So all over 20 main competencies. It could have been maybe different ones, but they had to come up with a set that somehow would cover all the elements we say would have to be inside the box when we open the democracy box. So values. I would not really look at all the values, but just look at the word value. When you say the second one, competence 2, valuing cultural diversity. The word valuing is a core element in this approach. It does not say accepting cultural diversity. It does not say tolerating cultural diversity. It says valuing cultural diversity. Means to be different is not something, okay, we have to take it because it's there, so let's accept it. No, we say it's good that we are different. This is the question here. So in a democracy, and this is the definition, we only could tell we are, let's say, a ripe democracy if we really value the differences. So which country can tell of itself that it does really do it? Maybe on Monday we do it, on Friday we don't. Maybe in summer we do, in winter we don't. It is an up and down, but it is a core question, a question we need always to ask. How do we see differences? How do we see diversity? Is it something where we say, at the end of the day, we came so far because we have diversity, not despite? And that's a difference. Attitudes. Openness to cultural otherness as an element. That's an attitude. And that's different. That's difficult. We know it's difficult. It's an element. By wording, we can say, oh, yes, I'm open to others. But what does it mean in my daily life? What does it mean when I say, yes, this is combined with the valuing of the cultural diversity? So this element of openness, you see, what the competencies want is to open a discussion box. Maybe Pandora's box, I don't know. This is the first time I think of this, but this is not bad. And we know when the Pandora's box is only open and closed again, then it's terrible. If it's open, it has to be open until it's finished, until everything has been discussed. The last one I love a lot, tolerance of ambiguity. This means I tolerate and I accept that nothing is solved, that life is complicated, that it is difficult. Sometimes this could be the best description of what does it mean to grow up, to be able to tolerate ambiguity. Yes, to tolerate that it is not just clear, it's not solved. We have a huge discussion inside Switzerland these days now about what should the government decide about COVID. And some say, they're too strong, you know, they decide everything themselves and we need to open up everything. And so we need to stand it that we don't know yet. And maybe some decisions are the right ones, some not. Skills. Look at those skills and look maybe into, when we look at the formal education, into the classroom. Every teacher would probably say that is in favor of, let's say, active learning. He'd say, oh, yes, these are the things I do daily in my classroom. Yes, autonomous learning skills, critical thinking skills, skills of listening, observing, and so on. But that's good pedagogy. And here they say, no, it's more than good pedagogy. It is what we call important skills for a democratic society. When you see, why do, for instance, companies or countries or regions fall apart? It is proper, for instance, because there is no empathy, or there's no cooperation possibility, or there's no conflict resolution skills, and so on. So to see that in all the skills that are described, the word democracy does not appear. It is an how do you call this word? Operationalisierung. I know even doesn't even the word. I mean, they try to break democracy in 20 little pieces and say, what could be the brickstones be that build this house that we call democracy. And the last one, knowledge and critical understanding. The first one I certainly like a lot, knowledge and critical understanding of the self, of myself. If I want to be part of a community, this is an element I really need to be very much aware of. Knowledge and critical understanding of language and communication, a core element of understanding others, of trying to find out in which way do we try to make us understandable. When you look at the history of humankind, the development of communication was a huge factor of cooperation, but also of misunderstanding. But you see, knowledge and critical understanding as the fourth element. So those are the 20 competencies that have been developed in the framework to say, okay, those are the ones that would describe, still on a quite high level, but this is not enough. Competence here, competence 5, respect, has by itself now the so-called descriptors. This is the visibility. When you say, yes, respect, yeah, I find respect wonderful. Yes, I respect, but what does it now mean? So they have defined 6 descriptors that somehow match to people the age between, let's say, 12, 15 and further on. Descriptors can be developed also for different ages or for different situations. But for instance here, respect, a descriptor means give space to others to express themselves. Wonderful element of a descriptor of respect in each team. So maybe right now I'm not very good in this descriptor, but I could say, okay, this is maybe my task right now to speak. But you know, this element of giving others the possibility to express themselves, even though I might not agree, even though it might not be expressed so well. Descriptor 28 expresses respect for other people as equal human beings. Is it just a lip serve? Is it something that's real? I express respect for equalness. Treat people with respect regarding to their cultural background. Means I need to understand the cultural background, or I need to understand that others also have the possibility to explain the world with their cultural background. Respect towards people with a different socioeconomic status than I have myself. Downwards, upwards. How is this? I have some difficulties with people that drive with these huge cars and wear these fancy clothes and have this amazing. So I would have probably a difficulty with descriptor number 30. So I have to work a little bit on this. Religious differences. Respect does not mean tolerate. Respect means I believe that it is a positive element, that there are also different religious possibilities. So here you see the descriptors that have been developed to now describe the visibility of respect. So if I, for instance, walk into a classroom, if I work in a group, in a project, I could take this list here and now ask myself or discuss with people, when we say respect is a core element here, how is it visible? We say, yes, we respect each other, but what is, and this is why it's called descriptor, is it described this way? I give you an example here. It could be that we say, for instance, our meeting here, we have the four competencies. Competence number 2, value and cultural diversity. Number 5, respect. Number 11, analytical critical thinking skills, and knowledge and critical understanding of the self. Those are the 4 that would be important for me with the descriptors. Now, afterwards, we could analyze it. Did we do it in the way? Did we plan it in this way? Does it work in this way? Do we go towards democracy with whatever we do? Or is it just something that we would like to do, but we don't do it ourselves? We don't really fulfill this ourselves. I have developed with our graphic designer at university a competence garden. And this could be something, and you have it also in the materials that you received from us as a printout. You see, when, for instance, you have a project or you have a team or whatever, You describe your team or your project or your plan or whatever you have in the middle. And then you go through the garden. And then you say, okay, what are now the elements here that the competences that maybe are already there when it's running for long? And then I go to the huge list of descriptors and write it in the empty spaces up here. And then all of a sudden, more and more, for instance, when I say, okay, value cultural diversity with the possible descriptors that you find on the backside, then you say, okay, yes, this is true for us, or this we would like to plan. And filling this space, you develop, let's say, a democracy profile of your project. Discussion group. When reading the 20 competences, what are your personal strengths? And compare it what you said before. What can democracy expect from you? Where are you strong in? Second question, which of them are important in your professional life? Go through the 20 competencies. Again, you have it also in the materials, and you have it on the slides also, the butterfly. When you look at the 20 competencies, this has been developed and decided by some colleagues from all over Europe. Is there anything missing? Is there a competence where you say, this doesn't, that's huge, this is missing for myself? Again, trying to understand this could cover what we call a democratic approach, a democratic culture of the society. I would like to have a last look at the slides to finish with, so we can promise to finish together. Is it visible?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, looking ahead. This was like a little taste of the development of this framework. Right now we are developing a short, let's say it's like a 20-hour course in the Council of Europe, and then a 3-month course for trainers for countries for the approach of this. So we know that this little 2-hour thing was really not satisfying at all. At the same time, we wanted to try to give you a little taste. So the question is for us here to understand, would you like to know more, learn more about this approach, culture of democracy? Would you like to make use of it? Are you interested in any kind of support? Maybe you are interested in training of your staff. It's not anything we have ready. It's just something, I think, in RECI, we have the possibility to decide and discuss. And if there is the need to do so, I would gladly also discuss this with the colleagues in the Council of Europe, because I'm sure that if we have a group that is interested, we could organize a training together and have really an impact and the possibility for specialists to say, okay, these are the questions I want to bring in, and maybe these are possibilities I would like to test in my organization. Maybe still for the moment you say, okay, what is it really? I mean, is it now to learn more about democracy, or is it to understand what it is all about? It is probably this combination to become aware of what is going on. We have found out, especially also in old democracies, where democracy as such is not discussed anymore. But we need to find what are the real values and elements that stand for what we call democracy. And this is exactly what is discussed right now in many of our countries, where even is it in transition, or is it in a situation where people somehow fell asleep and find out now in these complex societies, what do we need to take care of? So to have this element of a set of competencies as a core entering door to have this discussion, this would be the interesting idea. And the last question, are you interested to stay informed about what is being developed of all the instruments and materials and so on around this competence framework? So to bring in your ideas, I would, to open the discussion, I would like to give back to Beatrice and Nadine. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rolf. So you asked a lot of questions, also creates a lot of ideas of how what we learned and discussed today could be further pursued in many, many different ways. Good, it's time to close the webinar. It was a real pleasure to see all of you, to have a little bit of an insight of the great work that you're doing and your exchange that we had.